Let's get started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We are happy to be your hosts for today, but I'll pass it on to Brian. I think, Brian, you have a few things to get started with, right? Okay.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our 10 a.m. session entitled Mental Health of Black Communities in Canada, Overcome an Obstacle, Bridging Gaps. Today, we have Ajerio Gene and Vanya, who are both from Ontario Association of Children's Aid Society. Before we continue with the session, I would like to give you a brief summary of this week. Black Mental Health Week is designed to support positive mental health of Black communities and individuals by providing alternative ways to support mental health and wellness. This year's event will work again to amplify the voices of Black communities and bring much needed awareness to the historical and current effects of systemic anti-Black racism on mental health and wellness. The theme for Black Mental Health Week 2023 is Be You, Be Well. And our presenters today will be talking with us with that in mind. There will be a brief short survey at the end of this session that will be dropped in the chat box. So please provide any feedback for this session. This session will also be recorded. We will continue with the land acknowledgements. One second. We respectfully acknowledge the sacred land in which we gather today as a traditional territory of many indigenous nations. For thousands of years, this has been the land of the Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabeg, Seneca, Chippewa, Inuit, Métis, and the current treaty holders, Mississaugas of the Credit Peoples. We share responsibility with the caretakers of this land to ensure the dish is never empty and restore relationships that are based on peace, friendship, and trust. We take this moment to openly reflect on the history of these lands that we now call home and commit to aligning with the struggle of our Indigenous neighbors and supporting their future. We are all treaty people. Many of us come here as settlers, immigrants, or newcomers in this generation or generations past. We acknowledge the 400+ year history of communities of African descent in Canada who are not settlers, but who were forcibly displaced from their lands and brought to Turtle Island against their will as part of the transatlantic slave trade. We are indebted to our ancestors and recognize generations past. Today, we continue their work, fighting for our collective benefit, denouncing colonial histories, breaking down systemic barriers, improving the health and lives of our communities, and pushing back against anti-Black racism. We are committed to real and impactful change for today and hope for our futures. Once again, thank you so much for joining our session today. And now I'll pass it off to Will.
Well, welcome everyone. Welcome again. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Brian. I'm joined with my colleague, Vanya. Just a very quick housekeeping before I pass it on to Vanya is so we don't know who is in the audience. We don't know where you're joining us from. So if you just want to put a quick message, what sector, so education, for example, healthcare, child welfare, or just, what community engagement work, or, I'm just an individual who wants to be part of this discussion. So just put that in the chat and that will really inform, maybe examples that we give and how we walk through this presentation and discussion. Thank you. Pass it on to you, Vanya.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ajay, and good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Vanya Patrick Drakes. I'm very excited to be here and to represent for One Vision, One Voice on what for us is a very important intersection. So we know that it is Black Mental Health Week. We know that it is also International Women's Day. So welcome to all of you. We have an hour, just under an hour, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to speak about anti-Black racism across sectors, including within the child welfare system. We're going to speak a little bit about One Vision, One Voice and what we do. And hopefully we can share some promising practices that can be used across various sectors when it comes to combating anti-Black racism. So transforming leadership, for example, transforming service delivery, emphasizing and amplifying community voice, speaking about policies and practices, and then finally looking at some challenges, some critiques, and then potential responses to these challenges and these critiques. So as I speak, especially, and I see a familiar, hello, David. As we speak, if there are any questions, any comments, any input at all, please, we don't want to be hearing just our voices all morning. It may be a little bit dull, so please feel free to raise your hand, put something in the chat, and we'd be happy to engage with you in that way. Let me see. So we do have people from public health. Heather, Covenant House, welcome. We have a nursing student, someone from the Ministry of the Solicitor General, the Correctional Division. Outpatient child and adolescent mental health, wonderful. Toronto Community Benefits Network, Central Toronto Youth Services, mental health and single session counseling, ages 0 to 29, very good. Lots of different organizations represented today. So we are very happy to have all of you with us. So we know that Canada is home to over 38 million people, right, of various ethnic origins. And data from 2016 suggests that almost 1.2 million of those people in Canada identify as Black, right? And of those people, more than half of that Black population lives in Ontario. And of that Black population, about half of that those people have immigrated to Canada, right, from 150 different countries, including Jamaica, Nigeria, Somalia, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, and other countries across Africa and the Caribbean. So we know that the Black community in Canada, in Ontario, it is diverse, it is rich, right? But as Black people, we're brought together by a common phenomenon, right? We know that anti-Black racism is built into Canadian structures, it's built into Canadian systems, and it does have a significant impact on the lived outcomes of Black communities and the health, physical and mental health of Black communities. So we have this diagram on the right-hand side, and we're saying that anti-Blackness, in terms of the paradigm, it positions Blackness as inherently problematic, instead of recognizing the long, rich, and diverse history that Black people hold. We have Black people, Black communities having been severely disadvantaged as a result of historical and contemporary systemic racism. So I did a session the other day and we were kind of investigating anti-Black racism and the origins and so on. And we were looking back at when the gentleman Linnaeus, right, back in the 17th century, when he was looking at categorizing humans according to a scientific hierarchy. Back then, taxonomy was huge. We're looking, if you remember your biology, I mean, we're looking at, what was it, phyla, so kingdom, phyla, classes, genus, orders, species, and so on. So they thought, you know what, let's categorize humans similarly. And we had 4 varieties, that was the term used, of humans. And of those varieties, whenever they looked at Black people, and we looked at, okay, well, in terms of capacities for learning and capacities for intelligence and so on, Black people always occupied the lowest rung of that hierarchical structure. So adjectives used to explain, to describe Black people, lazy, phlegmatic, adorned by fat, right? Just callous. And it led to perceptions that still persist in contemporary society today. And we're going to get into that a little bit more when we look at statistics within healthcare, statistics within policing, and so on. And Ajay, again, if you're able to just monitor the chat and make sure there are no queries or questions as we go, that'd be appreciated. So in terms of confronting ABR in the child welfare, we're saying that the system is not neutral, right? And because we know the system is not neutral, because we know that these perceptions persist, where if I see a crowd of Black youth, I might automatically just clutch my bag a little bit tighter, because you never know, there may be something sketchy. Sometimes they're up to no good, right? These perhaps unconscious biases that people hold that affects then how they interact with Black communities, and that impacts the outcomes that Black communities face in healthcare, in the labor market, in policing, in education, social services, and so on, and in child welfare. That is why One Vision, One Voice focuses on addressing ABR and supporting improved outcomes and equitable services for Black children, Black youth, and Black families. So we utilize a cross-sectoral approach, and we place attention on how all these systems, especially education, because we see a lot of anti-Black racism manifesting within education and within policing and within healthcare. And we're looking to see how these interact to create and maintain racial disproportionality and disparities within child welfare, and then how we can address it, right? Because again, these the ABR is affecting children, youth, families' mental and physical well-being. So let's examine some of these statistics. Let's look at education first. So school safety data shows that Black students have higher suspension and expulsion rates than other students. So by the time Black students finish high school, data suggests that 42% have been suspended at least once, compared with 18% of other students. So let's look at potential responses here. Some persons may say, oh, okay, well, that's because Black children and youth, they don't have any behavior, they don't know how to behave themselves, they're just more problematic. I'm sure, was this in Canada? I feel like it was. There was something in the news recently about a 6-year-old Black youth who was locked into a room. And usually I don't like to go through the comments, but I said, let me just look at the comments. This was on Twitter, and persons are saying, yeah, probably deserved it. Yeah, if you behave that badly, then yes, you're locked in a small room all by yourself, right? So the perception is if Black youth are penalized more significantly, oh, they must be deserving of this penalization. When actually the data is suggesting that regardless, let's say you have a room full of students of different racial identities, all behaving the same way, that it is the Black students who are penalized more heavily or who are more noticed for the behavior rather than persons of other racial backgrounds. Natasha, thank you. Someone says, yes, that was in Canada. Absolutely. Right? So yeah, so education, we see that happening. We see, especially when we look again at immigration and having Black people from different cultures within Canada, we're seeing that Black youth, when they bring their culture to school, they bring their foods to school, that they're penalized in that way. And the parents are also penalized in that way. So it's like, okay, well, I bring to school a roti, I bring to school a patty, and it's seen as less than, right, compared to the Eurocentric norm. So now child welfare may become involved because teachers are unfamiliar or place lower value on cultural foods and cultural norms, right? And then as we think about these things, let's think about the impact that it has on the children's well-being. So feelings of belonging within the classroom, the frustrations that can occur within the classroom. I spoke with a group recently and they were saying there's certain tracks within the education system, and it was recommended, they wanted to go into, let's say, and they were said, no, not engineering for you. I don't think that would be appropriate for you. Perhaps you can go into, and they called another career that stereotypically is considered to require perhaps less academic rigor, right? Not based on the student's grades, but just simply because, okay, well, this is a Black student. You couldn't possibly be thinking of going into engineering. You couldn't possibly be thinking of going into medicine and so on, right? What is the impact then on the student's self-esteem? If a parent now has to come into the classroom and advocate for their child, oh, the angry Black mom is coming, right? And now she's feeling like she has to temper herself. It's a bit of a dichotomy of existence that has to take place for parents. Let's look at health disparities. And I'm just reading the chat as I go. I see, really, no, we do not lock up children in the room. Who are these people? I closed the chat, Mary, because I couldn't, like, I was like, I can't. Why am I in the chat in the first place? I always kind of berate myself after I go in, because you see a lot, and it's frightening because these are real people that we are existing around, right? That have these points of view that, yes, you're deserving at 6 years old of being locked in a small classroom that apparently when you stretch your arms out, this is the width and the length and the breadth of the classroom. And this is what you're locked in because of bad behavior at 6, right? Mary says, you were speaking my life. And it's not even a good thing, right? But I'm glad that it resonates, and let's keep going to see what other disparities exist for Black communities within Canada. So 3 times higher rate of diabetes among Black women in Ontario compared to white women, 1.7 times higher rate of hypertension among Black women in Ontario compared to white women, and 60% higher rates of psychosis among segments of the Black population compared to the general population. So again, now we look at the responses of people when they hear this information. Some may say, okay, well, yes, that's because Black people eat worse, they don't care about their health, they're just fat, they're just lazy, they are not educated about food. Or if we're talking about psychosis, oh, okay, it must be amplified because of significant drug use, all of these stereotypical responses, right? As opposed to perhaps taking a step back and we're looking at the systems and structures and we're realizing that, okay, well, Black people, especially when it comes to job searches, for example, are more heavily penalized when they're looking for a job. So especially if I see a Black name, oh, Keisha, name of our manager, and she mentions her name often, right, as a barrier, regardless of your extensive academic background and your experience. You see a Black name, I'm going to put that to the side. Oh, okay, I don't want someone ghetto at my office, right? Oh, I don't want someone Black. This is just going to be a pity hire, right? A tokenism and so on and so forth. So if we're looking at these barriers when it comes to jobs, so now we have perhaps higher rates of poverty, higher rates of persons experiencing homelessness. And now how does this then affect levels of stress? How does this affect your physical well-being, your blood pressure? Why is it then? So then we can see the direct links between the outcomes and hypertension. We can see the direct links between the outcomes and access to high quality nurturing foods and so on. And we can, if we take a step back, remove the blame from the Black population as opposed to saying, okay, well, this is your fault. And we instead examine the systems that create these disparities that affect Black populations in the first place, right? And even if we go as far back as colonial times, and some people say it's irrelevant, I know we don't have a lot of time. I wish we could get into it further, but definitely it is still relevant in society today because we still have persons who are able to speak to experiences on plantations and so on. And we know, when colonialism ended, the persons who were enslavers, so the European persons, would have received compensation for the loss of their property, i.e. enslaved African people. Whereas enslaved African people, you're free, but free to what, right? Free to what opportunities, free to what income, free to what outcomes compared to the European persons who were receiving compensation for losing you, right? And then this wealth, although of course we're not suggesting that all persons of European descent are wealthy, but this wealth helped to create disparities within society that sustain today, right? We move on to social exclusion. Let me just check the chat very quickly. The petition. Oh, yeah, I didn't go too far into that, Natasha. I couldn't mentally, and yeah, students, yes, absolutely. All right, so social exclusion. Black Canadians make up 9.5% of the Canadian prison population, but represent only 2.5% of the overall Canadian population, right? And that ties well with policing. So Black people in Toronto are 20 times more likely to be shot dead by the police than white people. And there was a report that came out, I think last year, from the Toronto Police Service. Let me see if I can just find it very quickly. I had it somewhere because I'm like, this is really significant. 1 moment. Yes, so it was in June 2022, and the Toronto Police Service acknowledged that based on its race-based data collection on use of force and strip searches, that it continues to disproportionately use force and other enforcement actions against Black communities, right? So in other words, the data is showing that Toronto police officers use more force against Black people and more often, with no clear explanation for why, right? Except for the fact that, yes, these are Black people. So, and let's think about it. Is it because Black people are More violent? No, but that may be the perception, right? That Black people are more likely to be carrying drugs, more likely to be violent, more likely to be a problem than other persons occupying perhaps the same income position, the same demographics, etc. The only difference, again, would be race. Income inequality. Almost 1 in 4, so 24% of Black Ontarians qualify as low income, as compared to 15% of the general racialized Ontario population. And then finally, food security. Black households are 3.56 times more likely to be food insecure than white households. Looking in the chat, we're seeing Mary says they can't be okay with their biases, but we can't and don't deserve to live by their biases. Absolutely correct. Yes, and as Jerrigan is saying, the system must be dismantled. It continues to cause immense harm to our children and youth, absolutely. And even when adults are affected, this indirectly affects the mental health and the well-being of our children and our youth as well, right? I am not able to parent effectively, me personally, if I am feeling worn, if I am feeling stressed, and we know that these constant manifestations of anti-Black racism across sectors can cause stress to whoever is impacted. And then we have to go home and parent effectively. Even parenting strategies, if we're looking at immigration and we're looking at different cultures, you arrive in Canada and it's like, oh, I don't want to do anything wrong with my child, because if it's perceived as incorrect, automatically, child welfare gets involved, right? And then especially if you're a newcomer, and Najir again is going to get into resources for caregivers soon, right? You may not necessarily be aware of how to interact with the child welfare system or with other systems, and that can also be stressful. Let's look at statistics within the child welfare system. So in Ontario, 41.8% of children in the care of CAS Toronto were Black at a time when the city's under 18 population was just 8.2%. And this is considered an extreme disproportionality. We also have the OIS report that we published recently, and I'm going to just drop the link to that report in case you have not had a chance to see it. Right, so here it is in the chat. And the data from this report suggests that compared to white children, Black children and families are over twice as likely to be investigated, 2.5 times as likely to have their case substantiated, 1.7 times as likely to have their case referred to receive ongoing or longer term services and supports, 2.5 times as likely to be placed in out-of-home care during the investigation. And then we have schools and police were more likely to refer Black children than white children in child maltreatment related investigations. Right? So I want us to kind of sit with these statistics for a little bit. And I heard a great analogy the other day about left-handers, and it kind of resonated with me. The gentleman was suggesting if you ask a right-hander, right, if the world was built for them, they might probably be like, no, we have equal access, left-handers and right-handers to everything. Why would you say something like that, right? The world is built for everybody. But if you ask a left-hander the same question, right, then left-handers are able to identify just things within society that indicate that, you know what, this world wasn't necessarily built for me as a left-hander. The desks at university, for example, those the ones that you kind of flip over and put on the chair, right? Most of them, not all of them, most of them are on the right side. And then the ones that are on the left side, right-handed people are occupying them. So then as a left-hander, you're kind of stretched over and I can speak as a left-hander, right? You're stretched over on the desk and your arm is getting smudged up, and all of these things, including like scissors and the inky pens that leave the side of your hand all messy, right? So we're imagining something like this, but on a more significant and a larger scale, right? So I'm knowing that in healthcare, my symptoms are less likely to be taken seriously, right? Up to recently, Black women were perceived to feel pain less by medical professionals, up to very, very recently. And I would propose that some medical professionals still believe that Black women don't experience pain in the same way that non-Black women experience pain. And it's why we're seeing Black mothers dying within childbirth at a significantly higher rate than non-Black people, right? You're assumed to be seeking drugs more within the healthcare setting. Women affected by conditions like endometriosis and polycystic ovarian syndrome, for example, experiencing significant pain and being dismissed because you're faking it, right? It can't be that big of a deal. Knowing that there may be, aggression due to your identity, no access to jobs due to your identity, right? Certain job positions, even though you may be more than qualified, they're not for you, perhaps even because of your accent. So we're looking at intersectionalities now of identity, perhaps religious affiliation, right? Oh, we don't want to make our stakeholders uncomfortable, so we wouldn't put this particular person in this role. So we're really saying that systems in Canada were not built to benefit Black people, right? And racial discrimination is linked to poor physical and mental health outcomes. So overall, for example, depressive symptoms in Black Canadians, 6 times higher, right, than found in the general population. And race-based events on a whole, and there are so many different examples of race-based events, they can yield emotional and psychological injury that negatively impacts mental health through eliciting traumatic stress, right? And responses may include hypervigilance, avoidance, numbing, emotional distress, and even if we go a little bit deeper, erasure of identity, right? If my Blackness is a problem, some people may say, okay, well, let me try to assimilate into what is perceived as the norm, as what is okay. And that assimilation can be in terms of behavior, it can be in terms of speech, erasure of culture, right? For some, it's even physical. So we know colorism is significant across many communities, including within Black communities. And we see skin whitening. In Jamaica, it's called skin bleaching, right? Being something that's prevalent. We're bleaching our skin because, okay, if my skin is lighter, if I'm more aligned to being considered white or light, I may afford greater privileges within society. Think about that for a second. It's significant, right? It's real. So in terms of One Vision, One Voice, what we do. So we look specifically at anti-Black racism within child welfare, right? And we look at community voice. We try to tackle research and data, and we try to make sure that our approach is a cross-sectoral one, so that we include data and considerations from immigration, housing. We consider income inequality. We consider education and the education sector. We consider healthcare, right? This is our team. Sorry about the stretched photos, but Keisha Facey, who is so sorry that she couldn't be here today, is our wonderful program manager. And she leads the development of implementable policies and strategies to address ABR that's embedded in child welfare, right? This is me. I help out the team wherever I can. And of course, Ajira Gene works specifically with community engagement, and she's going to speak about that in just a couple minutes. So this diagram kind of illustrates how we tackle it, and we're trying to get into strategies. And I'm hoping, I've seen so many different organizations represented today. I'm hoping that whichever organization you're from, that there's something that you can perhaps take that is also implementable in your sector, right, in your sphere. So we consider, for example, when we're trying to address anti-Black racism, we consider leadership. We consider the delivery of service. Sometimes we hear, oh, okay, no, we deliver service to everybody exactly the same because we're all one and we're all equal and we're all humans. True, we are all humans and we should all be equal, but we want to make sure that the services that we provide are culturally appropriate, right? Culturally responsive. There's no reason why I should be offering Eurocentric services to clients, to families who don't have a Eurocentric background. Right? So just to keep these considerations in mind, especially, and even if we look outside of racial identity, right? Cultural identity, language, when we look at religious affiliations, we look at gender equality, we want to make sure that we are inclusive when we're speaking of service delivery, and that's something that we endeavor to do. We look at training, so training for staff within the organizations and making sure that staff are aware of the promising practices, the updated promising practices, because sometimes in organizations we hear, okay, yeah, I did training back in 2000. And we know that we've made significant steps since the year 2000, right? We try to engage agencies, so the child welfare agencies across Ontario. We want to make sure that we are hearing from them, because at OVOV, we're not necessarily on the ground in that way, but we know that we want to hear from people who are, so that they can help to inform the work that we do. And then we try to look at data and policy analysis. So if we want to change anti-Black racism, we want to make sure that we're going to be starting from the disparate policies, from the system itself, and trying to agitate for change within the system, so that then that can trickle down, right? So, and I'm being mindful of time. Let's go. So in terms of transforming leadership, and this is our wonderful CEO at OACAS, Nicole Bonney. I'm going to just read her quote very, very quickly. She says, "I often get asked what it was like to be appointed as the first Black CEO, right, in the Ontario child welfare system. And when I do, I think about a phone call that I got from a community member shortly after I started at OACAS. She shared with me her joy and pride in being able to share my story with her teenage daughters. She wanted her children to know that they too can become leaders, that similar to my own, their pathways to success have been paved by the tireless efforts of other Black women. In difficult times, this is one of the conversations I go back to. It reminds me that my story is bigger than just me. It connects both those that came before me and those who are yet to come. And that is the power of storytelling." And she said this during Black History Month, right? So she was saying, so this Black History Month, take the time to truly listen and learn, and then join us in the work we are doing to address anti-Black racism across our province and across systems to ensure the safety, the well-being, and the success of Black children, youth, and families and communities. Right now, you may not necessarily work with children and youth, but regardless of your sphere, right, of influence, remember that you are doing work on behalf of the clients that are served, right, including the Black clients. So we're making sure that we are considering their safety and well-being and success. So very, very, very quickly, if we're making changes within an organization, we understand that an understanding of ABR has to start at the top of any organization. So we have the African Canadian Leadership Mentorship Program, the ACLMP, right? We're making sure that staff within child welfare receive opportunities for promotion, receive opportunities to sit at the top, so that they're able to influence policies and influence practices that directly impact Black children, youth, and families within child welfare, right? In terms of service delivery, we already spoke and mentioned that it should be equitable, it should be culturally informed and culturally relevant. So any service delivery team that you have, it should have staff who have a prior knowledge and have prior experience working with Black families and community members, right? And that they're aware of culturally informed practices and aware of systemic racism, right? Including any staff that are assigned to assess Black families or to work with Black families, they should have this understanding. And again, this is where training comes into place, right? So what we have is the best, I should have a pointer. I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that right now, but we have the best practices guide. It's trauma informed, and we're making sure that this guide is available for members of child welfare, like across the agencies, providing services to children of African descent, so that they're able to keep up with so that they're able to keep up with promising practices, and that they're aware of, and that they're able to provide culturally relevant services to the Black community. And we are at Ajiria Gene, who's going to take over and really speak into community voice, emphasizing and amplifying community voice.
Thank you, Vanya. Thank you. And I was really enjoying my time with the chat. I was getting too comfortable. So because I will be rushing through my slides, I also want to use this opportunity to say or share that in my capacity, I host a lot of community engagement sessions. They're very, very kind of chill, semi-formal, and we dig deep into many things that I liked here and the work that we're doing around stakeholder engagement and the intersection with child welfare. And I welcome you to connect. I welcome you to send topics, things that are really burning, and we can always have this virtual engagement throughout the year. So here I go. So emphasizing community, and amplifying community voice. What we always say is when it comes to child welfare, at least from my background of doing frontline work for many years, people or persons with privilege may get to dictate who the stakeholders are. So who are the top people that we should be engaging? Who are the people that we should be inviting to case conferences and things like that? So what we try to do at One Vision, One Voice, so this is a program, we are sticking to the roots because it is really coming from the community. So the African community are the ones that really pushed for this, and it's been funded by the Ministry of Children and Community, Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services. So we're sticking to the roots that the community brought this together. This is a program, so they hold us accountable. And in holding us accountable, we ensure that our work with all the 52 CSs across Ontario, that they're doing the same kind of work. So you don't get to say, you know what, it's just the school boards in my jurisdiction, the medical facilities, daycare, and maybe the criminal justice system. Those are the people that will be considered stakeholders. No, we're pushing the narratives and pushing for engagement with, religious affiliations, associations, even if it's a neighborhood association, if it is a person or group of people that are supporting newcomers to Canada, for example, if they're persons whose English is not even their first language, as long as they are supporting and engaging families that are involved with child welfare agencies, that they need to be part of that. So the next slide, please. And I think I'll speak more to this, Vanya. So when it comes to overrepresentation, we know that the system is non-neutral, and that includes child welfare agencies. We work with them, we've been there, we know that it was not designed for persons who are Black identifying, at least not to create a space where you're sharing your power. It's a very powerful establishment. So how do we work with them? One thing, I don't know who's heard of or who's had the opportunity to read our 11 race equity practices. You can put yes, no, raise your hand. This is it came out of the research that was done over a period of time that collected information from, obviously, the people that I'm talking about, the stakeholders, child welfare staff, and even children and families that are involved with child welfare agencies. And they came up with 11 recommendations or steps to be taken. And it's broken down into two different groups. One is, of course, the organizational context, as well as the direct practice work. And we believe, and research shows that if you need to bring about change, especially to address the disparities and overrepresentations of Black children and youth in care, you need to start from inside out. So you need to have that culture change, that cultural shift. You cannot continue to work in a very typical way. So especially when you're working with Black persons who are already marginalized when it comes to other systems that have pushed them. There's an image that I don't have, but I like to speak to it. It shows that when Black families are involved with child welfare agencies, we only see what led to that involvement. There's so many things that we don't see. What are the underlying issues that have pushed Black families to become involved with child welfare agencies? The slide says here that each agency, so one of the things that we're asking for is that you're working with Black-led establishment, Black seven establishments, in order to bring about what some will call an equity team. Someone was talking about in the chat, and I think I put a comment there. When there's no representation, when we don't have co-conspirators or allies in a space, it's very easy to do the work the normal way. But when you have people who can call out anti-Black racism, microaggression, who can call out, this is what, nothing but this differential treatment, then the dialogue and then the shift can happen. So this is one of the things that we're recommending, that in order to amplify the voices of a community, you can't do it in silos. You need to work with a community. You need to ensure that families are also aware of spaces and support outside child welfare agencies. At the end of the day, agencies are going to close, but families are still going to weave in and out of spaces while CSs are not open. So that relationship has to be built as well. I'll read here. So the role of the community partner or Black-led organization is to become collaborators. So again, it goes back to, you need to share your power. Yes, it may not be the school board who has a memorandum of understanding or polished policies and protocols. It may just be a retired nurse or someone who just wants to open up their home to a family or to a Black youth. We need to be bringing them to the table. I think I'll go to the next slide, Vanya. This one is, so this is one of our wonderful and well put and updated child welfare navigation guide. For many, I'll start with a preface. I want to believe almost everybody on this screen has had or has attended or participated in what child welfare agencies called duty to report. Anyone? And it's really basically just telling you what your obligations are, those that are mandated to report any cases of child abuse, whether it's physical, sexual, or issues of neglect or lack of supervision. This is a guide that and I'll put, Jenny, if you can put it in the chat for me as well. Oh, yay. This is a guide that, again, when we talk about how do we amplify the community voice, this is us sharing. When I say us, child welfare agencies sharing their power. Because the guide talks about, I mean, even though it emphasizes mostly the police and the school system, but there are commonalities and there are themes that weave into other spaces of that mandated referrers will fall under. So it talks about things like what happens when a family becomes involved with child welfare agency. Many people don't even know that. Not every CAS worker would literally or take the time to go through with a family. These are your rights, this is how you complain, because everything is so fast paced. However, for community persons who are supporting families, this is a guide that you can share with them, because it talks about when you're involved with the court system, what to do, what expectations are, what to expect, how to self-advocate. It talks about resources, even though the resources here are Toronto based. But again, what I say to when I engage staff is that it's your responsibility as well to build the relationship in order to amplify the voices of community members, to also be able to share with your service recipients resources in your jurisdiction. So this is a great one. And again, this is one of the ways that we are empowering the community to amplify their voices. The next one, okay, this one I'm very passionate about because I'm still high off the of the event. I have a few stats because I really want to tie this to Black mental health, and I want to tie it to the mental health specifically of Black youth. So I'll read a few things of my little scribbles here. And this one I'm reading, I got it from Pathways to Care, actually. So this is a report as of February 2022. I read a few things. It was actually, I'll start with another one. I take that back. So we know, and I think we said that in the chat as well, when it comes to Black persons or Black communities, there's not a lot of data. It's not new. Canadians still continue to rely on external data from the US and Australia and things like that. We're doing good, way better, at least in the last 5 years, right, Vanya, to collect this data. But this one that I like, and I'll read out, and we actually happen to have met one of the researchers at a symposium we attended in Ottawa. They were trying to look at what are some of the factors that contribute to the mental health of Black youths in Alberta. What are some of the things, whether they intersect with child welfare or not, but just by being Black in Canada from that demographic, what are some of the things? And I'll quickly highlight them. One was racial discrimination. Another one was intergenerational gap of families, right? And we know, puts child welfare in there. Child welfare can cause a lot of disruptions for families or for children. That time away from family and coming back, the values and things not aligning. It talked about microaggressions, stigmas, academic expectations, financial stress. This is my big one, lack of identity, as well as previous traumatic events, as well as religion. So Power Up is one of our ways of amplifying the voices of the community. It really is centered for our Black youth who intersect with child welfare agencies. It was an amazing event that we had this year. It's a yearly one. We just had the 5th one. Then one of the themes for this year was identity. So we talked about families, connections, and identity. We really want them to get a sense of identity, get a sense of connection. It's once in a year, but what are you going to take from here that kind of builds on your trajectory? And we were intentional to also bring representation from Jama Maxi, who is not only Black, but he also is Indigenous. So that intersection, and someone who was in care and who went through that and doing great work. We talk about resilience, but what happens past resilience? How do you surmount? How do you overcome all these challenges? So That was the purpose of that. So this was, I think it says 150. We actually had more than that because we had people who showed up that were not even registered, but we were happy to have them. So this is another way how we amplify the voice of the community, bring youth together to celebrate Black excellence. Yes, you're involved with child welfare, but what else? Let's talk about your identity. Let's really nurture that. Let's love on you. Let's really equip you with things. Let's build connection. And I know for sure that there were a lot of connections because I even left there feeling so youthful and I built a lot of connections myself. So the next one, we're rushing through policies and practices. This is really crucial. And I think I will read this piece, the first part of it actually. Transforming child welfare system requires critical examination of current harmful policies and legislation and collaboration on feasible ways forward. We said that, Vanya talked about all of these systemic issues, anti-Black racism playing out. I worked within child welfare for over 15 years. I know that the system is not neutral. I know that policies and practices continue to cause further harm to child welfare agencies. So what do? How do we change this? So what One Vision, One Voice is doing and has been doing is to work with agencies to revisit their policies and practices. Yes, we cannot change the legislation overnight, but what are some tangible things that we can do and how can we measure that? So some of these are embedded and incorporated into the recommendations that we've given. Read the latter part, recognizing the harm and trauma that comes from events like this. So all of this, George Floyd, murder, Breonna Taylor, everything that happened before 2020 and afterwards, police brutality, over policing of Black bodies, things that we see on social media, even the incident that just happened with a 6-year-old, all of these things can be very overwhelming for a person. So what we started doing, what OACS started doing is bringing Black staff together on a regular basis. It's one thing, and for some staff, they're the only ones or the only Black identifying person in their space. So you can imagine a frontline person trying to change or inform policies and practices on their own in a space where they are not even on top of the ladder in terms of power, right? So how do we bring them together on a regular basis to not only validate their experiences, to build connections, provide them with necessary training, that support and comfort so that they're not feeling this huge weight on their shoulder. In every space, especially for Black professionals, we're living it and we're also doing the work. So that can be very, very daunting for many people. So we ensure that we bring them regularly and that we've been doing that on a continuum basis. And that's one thing that I enjoy, to also be in spaces with other Black staff across Ontario. Okay. This one, okay, this is just some quick feedback from one of the ones we did. I can't really say, I think that was May. Yeah, May and November, just to see, what's the likelihood of attending or recommending. And it was very positive. It's usually a great turnout. Even once we did it on a Monday, like Monday morning, I think after a long weekend or something, but people still showed up. So again, that's how we ensure that we are nurturing and supporting Black persons navigating child welfare spaces. Disparity mapping, I think we can kind of skip on that. Okay, so the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Absolutely. I don't know who's worked in child welfare. We have, signs of safety. If I can remember everything, we have standards, we have eligibility spectrum. There's so many tools, and many do not even mention anti-Black racism. None mentions, not even many. No anti-Black racism. There may be harassment or differential treatment. So all of these tools that people continue to use in doing the work with people who hold the Black identity cannot necessarily bring about equitable outcome, cannot address disparities and overrepresentation for Black persons, right? So those tools have to be dismantled. Okay, and yeah, we did a good one. Okay, well, so that's it. Like I said, it's really rushed. We're hoping that you can stay connected, especially for these dialogues. Follow us on social media. We really want to be in spaces to bring current affairs and to talk about how we're addressing the different aspects of our work, whether it's leadership, our engagement with youth, our engagement with staff, our engagement with stakeholders, which is really my portfolio, but of course, research as well as our collaborative work. We want to give time. We have 7 minutes for Q&A, so I will pause. My apologies, I couldn't get to the chat, but maybe as we take questions, I will look through them as well. So feel free to put your chat in the Q&A box, or you can put it in the main chat. I see someone, Danny, I hope I said that right, served 9 years on CS. It's like, okay, so Toronto Board of Directors to make a difference and support positive change. Yeah, thank you, Danny. Yes, I lived with this and experience. Okay, SAST. I'm talking about the system because I don't think my family was the only one left in a dangerous situation. Yeah, the truth. But my experience with one of these things is not like the other. I was elected during the attempt to diversify government. Okay. So I don't know what your identity is, but I mean, I'm happy to hear that the work that you did at that time. Yes, many board of directors within child welfare agencies don't. There's no representation. It's usually the same people, and it's like the gentleman's club kind of thing, right? You bring your people in there and get the work done. So, I have a question, and I don't know how people will respond. Maybe they'll just put it in the chat, since I don't think we've received anyone. You know, we're talking about mental health, and I know even as a professional and as a caregiver to teenagers, sometimes I say to myself, holy moly, if I didn't know so many things, and if I was not involved with child welfare in the past, I wonder how many phone calls and how many engagements I would have had, and how scary and how traumatic that will be in terms of mental health, right? The fact that someone can come to you and say to you, you know what, this is how you do this is not how you do it. The fact that my culture is going to be scrutinized, right? In terms of how my children engage me, even though they're born in Canada, how they interact with me is going to be questioned, because again, this is how we live at home, but this is what is expected in the society. So I wonder too, and this is just really not a yes or no, but just for discussion, if we can, you know, how does culture play a role when it comes to that mental health, right? Mental wellness of Black persons who intersect with child welfare agency, when what you know to be the norm, it's been taken away or it's been questioned. How does that even impact your well-being? How do you even feel a sense of inclusion in that space, or want to even engage and do the work with them to address, you know, areas of concern, when that identity, that piece of your culture is already, you know what, we're going to put that in the back burner? How do you feel, you know, with the process of how that's been done? I don't know if my question or stuff makes sense, Vanier. So I'll say it again. Culture. Some of the culture intersecting with mental health and child welfare. Discussion, questions, comments? I like the initiative you mentioned. I'm happy to see things are changing. You're right about the need to more organization generation. Yeah, absolutely, Mary.
And even, I guess, even if we take a step back and look at like the statistics in general, like sometimes, of course, if you have a Black identity, it's like, okay, yes, I know this, I live this, right? But I find for some, when they hear about, you know, the disparities that exist across sectors, it's like, okay, I didn't realize it was that bad. Because sometimes we think of Canada and we're like, oh, we're better than the US, right? Things are better here. There's not much racism here. It's on a very small scale. And then we have spaces like this when we're examining Black mental health in child welfare and education. And we're realizing that it's a lot more significant than we may have thought in the first place. So I'd also be interested just to hear takeaways from people. Like, how are you feeling listening to the information? How are you feeling listening to the strategies? Is there anything that is implementable within your own space, within your own organization?
Somebody put it. And even if you're not in a position of power, you know, there's expectation for everyone to bring about this equitable work. Okay, I see a response here. There needs to be more conversation within our Black community to normalize mental health support and assistance. We also need more Black therapists and supporters. I'm a therapist and social worker, and I look forward to connecting with other Black therapists so we can ensure we are meeting the needs of our community. Absolutely, absolutely. Something I was trying to read then that I remembered here, and this I got from Pathways to Care. It was really that, you know, Black youth specifically, they're 2 times less likely to seek out any mental health support at the beginning stages, right? So it's usually when there's like huge crisis, and I think they use the word forensic when there's a forensic need, that's when our Black youth. So if white youth, I think it was between Black youth and white youth are 6 times more, okay, when they're feeling, they will seek out the support. When it comes to Black youth, it may take them 18 months. So from 8 months to 16 months, if my math is correct. So 2 times, right? And what are some of those systemic barriers, right? Maybe it has to do with what Transformative A said, where there's no representation. I don't want to go there and they think I'm cool. This person doesn't really get it. I may say things that are causing me stresses, like as I identify, maybe generational gap, maybe just microaggressions and all of those things leading to how I'm feeling and some of these mental health stressors. But if I'm having to talk to someone who does not have my lived experience, do they really get it? Are they really going to appreciate where I'm coming from? So those are some of the systemic issues. And I agree, we need to have representation and have Black therapists to be available. Okay. I'll read the last one. It's actually 11 o'clock. They want us to feel that there is barely any racism within the multicultural weeks. Yes, absolutely. Okay, I'll pass it on to you, Brian. But I mean, Vanny, I don't know if you have anything to say. It's never enough time when we have these conversations, but it's better than nothing, right?
Absolutely. No, I think that's it. Over to you, Brian. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, a great conversation. And, this is always the start of something great. They placed their contact information today. So, you can always reach out to continue that conversation. And we look to having, future conversations regarding this topic. The survey has been dropped in the chat. If you could take the time to fill that out so we could get your feedback. Greatly appreciate that. Yes, a bunch of thank yous in the chat.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, but I would like to thank you both for joining us today and providing this great conversation. All right, we have some contact information in the chat. But thank you so much, and we look forward to future conversations. All right, thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful one, and happy International Women's Day again. Bye.
Bye.